So I'm here to talk about In Search of the Millennial Penguin, and I'm supposed to be talking about technology and data and insight, and I should start by saying my first ever job before I got into even university was as a software engineer. I used to program in my summers, and then my mother said, well, software's never going to have a future, you should go and get a university degree, so I studied film instead. So I should preface it by saying, actually, I'm obsessed with technology, and I'm deeply, deeply interested and believe in it. And as a result of that, I do understand both the opportunity, but also how we can sometimes be misled by what seem to be perfect paradigms. So I'm going to talk about this elusive millennial penguin. And the reason I do that is because I spend a lot of my life trying to have arguments with clients around who we're talking to. Because I keep saying, we are going to target millennials. I don't know, has anyone ever seen that? We're going to target millennial? Yep. Or we're going to target women between the ages of 20 and 45. Another meaningless category. And I'm going to try to explain to you how, as my company, and how we've come on a long journey to try to make sense of what seem to be paradigms, but are in fact misleading groups. And actually how you can perhaps think about it differently. I am obsessed with inexplicable behaviors, especially within consumers. And it's often based on the frustration of marketeers who say, it's not fair, they're not using our product right. They're using too much washing powder. They're using it, if they only understood right. You know, why is it that they don't understand that we're better? But I think that's not a problem. That's the greatest opportunity that we ever look for. Those weird, inexplicable behaviors that we observe in consumers speak to an underlying unmet need that consumers are trying to meet. And if our brands or our companies can at least understand what's driving that, then we have an incredible opportunity to actually tell something authentic about who we are and maybe make the world a better place. I am pretty keen on not trying to make the world a worse place. I'm pretty keen on trying to help people make really good choices and do really good things, like perhaps make someone feel pretty good about themselves because they'd had a shower with the Dove shower gel that I've been part of, so they feel a bit more confident that morning based on that €2 shampoo, so that when they go for the job interview, they get the job. That's a really good thing. And that's every bit as important, in fact, I think far more important than trying to raise awareness about climate change. Because if I do a good job, and if we do a good job, can make real people maybe make sense of the world a bit better and feel good about it. My colleague said I had to put this back in. When I talk, we are often surrounded by these ideas of millennials and demographics. And I use this as sort of a good example. When an iPhone launches day one, you get these huge lines of people, for inexplicable reasons, lining up, having to have the phone day one. Yeah? They have to have it in their hands. And the minute they have it, of course, they feel dead and empty inside. I'm sort of one of those people, okay? But if you look at those people from a demographic point of view, it doesn't make sense. You'll have someone like me who's a bit posh and lives in a nice house and, you know, walks around in expensive shoes. But then you've also got maybe Asaf, who's maybe on 25 grand a year, and as a proportion of his income, it makes no sense to spend £1,000 on a brand new iPhone, and yet we are making that same decision. And 20 other consumers who also, if you look from a demographic point of view, it doesn't explain it. And yet, the truth is, we have made that decision for the same reason. We have the same underlying pattern of psychology. And when we understand that, then we can unlock something which is much more interesting. So I'm going to try and explain that. So what I'm going to say, there is no millennial penguin. Millennial is a meaningless, totally pointless term. It is I don't even know what age group it even defines, but it is pointless. It's used because it seems like it makes sense. It's a completely useless adjective, and it should be dismissed entirely because it speaks to nothing about why people behave the way they do. But what it often does is mislabel and misattribute behaviors or consumer insight based upon the year that you were born. I know this to be true. Okay? I know this is true because I know how to, I've done lots of work failing. So if you fail a lot, you discover very quickly that targeting people based on how old they are, or the fact that they happen to be a woman, is not a very good strategy. So I'm going to answer a few questions. One of the questions I'm going to answer is, I still prefer to drive, even though it means sitting in traffic for hours and hours on end. And it isn't just because I'm a selfish person, it's actually to do with my underlying psychology. Yep. And the reason why may be surprising to some of you, but it's very interesting. I'm also going to ask things like, why are some people anyway gluten intolerant? Gluten-free? I'll explain why so many people, it's a growing trend. Look at the data, it's a growing trend, loads of people. Why are so many people identifying as being gluten intolerant? And we work a lot in the pharma category. I know there's a treatment for MS. If I give it to you quickly, it's available on the NHS, available across Europe. If I give it to you within a year of you being diagnosed, it's free at the point of access, you will not get MS. You will essentially be asymptomatic. Okay? It's approved. The government want it given out. Chance of you getting it, about 5%. Right? That makes no sense, right? And it isn't the government. Can't blame them. Yep. And to make life better, 2 out of 3 people who get MS are women, around the age of 30, 25 to 35. Okay? If you are diagnosed, you've got about a 1 in 3 chance of it turning into the really catastrophic kind. Those are terrible odds. 1 in 3 are terrible odds. Yeah? I'm going to be in the 2 out of 3. But if you're not, that's good. If you can treat it in the first year, there are very, very effective remedies. If you leave it for 5 years, you're in a wheelchair. Okay? Approved, licensed. We work on it day in, day out. I'll explain why. And why do some people, anyone here like to post pictures of their meals on Instagram and post it? Who's that? Anyone? Anyone? Don't be shy. Right, I'll explain why. Okay? So big data. So I'm pretty good with math and stuff, so you can probably, as you can probably imagine, I'm a bit boring. We have this misnomer in thinking that because we seem to have enormous amounts of data, that represents a majority of the data that exists. It can never be anything other than a small subset, right? No matter how much data we're measuring, because, for example, we're not routinely measuring, I don't know, people's heart rate at a given time in an audience, or them tripping up this morning. There's so many data points, and what we tend to do is we tend to prioritize the data points that we can measure. There are 3 types of data generally. There's that sort of public data that's open to everyone. There's that paid data that we've paid loads of money for, but so has everyone else. Nothing special there. And then there's that proprietary data that only we have, which is not biased anyway, that only we understand about our consumers. We combine them together, and it's too much for anyone with a normal IQ to understand, so that we apply analysis to it. And the results that come out at the end, the insight, is what we call insights. And I describe it as being a bit like, it's a matter of faith. I think it's like I'm Jew, but it's like the Catholic Church have this thing about, what's in the cup? It is the blood of Christ. It is an article of faith. Too often, the conclusions of data have to be an article of faith. You don't get to use your basic, does that make sense to me? Because there's too complex for you to really judge, and you just have to accept the interpretation of experts to reference whether it's true or not. And sometimes it's true, but sometimes it can be misleading. There is a missing bit of it. And I think it's very important that if we're trying to work out why consumers are, and what to do with them, it should make sense to us. And that doesn't mean dumbing things down. There's a very good book by Jerry Muller, which I'm going to pretend to have read. I actually don't read, I listen to audiobooks. And he says the most characteristic feature of metric fixation is the aspiration to replace judgment based on experience with standardized measurement. I shan't pretend to reread the book to you. There's lots of examples of very sensible people with very, very good data making horribly wrong decisions. Yeah? Data is essential, analysis is essential, but it is always a subset. So what does it emit? Well, it emits, I think, 3 key parts. It emits the bits that people hide from us, that are hidden, yeah, that they know about themselves, but they don't tell us. The bits that they don't know about themselves, and they're blind to. Yeah, like I think I'm a really, calm and very sort of, introspective sort of person. I was surprised to discover that other people may not see me that way. And then there's those bits which no one's even considered are there, but which actually might be a key driver. Yeah, I'll give you one example. People buy lots of books. Yeah, very few books that are bought, novels, are ever read. Yeah, a lot of people buy books because they've got bookshelves. Yeah, when you move into a house, you've got empty bookshelves, you put books on it, and it's a strange behaviour. But many books are bought purely for the purposes of filling up a bookshelf. Makes no sense, and it does sort of make sense. Like we look at these all the time. So we look at those three parts. So I'm going to go to gluten free. So you're gluten free. So if you look at the trend, there's a massive trend toward gluten intolerance. Yeah, you see these gluten-free bread shops all around, sort of, southwest posh London, and and all the data, if you look at the data, there's a growing trend. You would imagine the reason for that is because there's lots of people who are gluten intolerant and we've just been able to reveal it. Correct? The data does not imply anything other than a discovery about something true about human beings and we are meeting that need. Okay? However, the data will lie to you. Because what's hidden is that gluten intolerance for many consumers makes me just feel special and different. Yeah? Very few people are actually gluten intolerant. Very, very few indeed. But try telling them that. Because actually, the gluten-free products contain lots of sugars and other stuff. So actually, if you're not gluten-free, if you're not gluten intolerant, you eat gluten-free food, you're actually doing yourself a real disservice. Yeah? And in fact, if you ask medical professionals about this, no matter what you do, no matter many tests you give someone, there are 2 tests for gluten intolerance, one which costs about $50 and one that costs like $1,000 in the States. Most people opt for the $1,000 test. It's 99.99% accurate. Almost no one accepts its results. Almost no one. So the reason why people are gluten intolerant is not because they're gluten intolerant. There's an underlying behavior behind it. If you can understand that, then you can do something really interesting. The data is showing me something as an interesting consumer trend. But the underlying behavior behind it is what's interesting to us. So I've got ADHD. Anyone here got ADHD? Yeah? Now, about 2.5% of adults have it. It's a constant across any country, any society. Starts in childhood, never gets rid of it. It's actually not 2.5%. It's about 1.6% of men and a bit fewer women. ADHD has been a big part of me trying to make sense of how I see the world. And I've got what we describe as a severe dysfunction. Yeah? On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm a 9.9. That means that it's extreme enough that if I don't do something about it, I will have no friends and no one left in my life because they can't keep up with me. And I'm entirely not self-aware. Okay? I see the world that way. And I'm part of a large number. On this journey, we've started working with lots of psychiatrists, clinical psychologists. These are not the behavioral psychologists that we're used to in marketing. So anyone here use Myers-Briggs? Might as well use a horoscope. Meaningless. It would be like using a ZX spectrum. It is relevant, except doesn't really help you at all because it's of a different age. The world has moved on consistently. And what we're doing is I thought it would be interesting to say, well, if ADHD shapes how I see the world, might that also be relevant to consumers too? So we've been on a journey to think about how that might help, and it's been very interesting. So what we have done is try to see what we can do with real data, but then combine it with what we understand now from a psychiatric point of view, in terms of how our brains are shaped, and see whether we can then empirically validate or invalidate those hypotheses and draw something interesting about who people are. Have I lost everyone yet? Don't worry, I will. Because truthfully, many times we do things, they're not necessarily for the reasons we might think. And it certainly isn't because we're millennials. So I've got ADHD, and this is the scorecard for someone with ADHD. And if these are sort of the items that a psychiatrist would see. And what's funny is when I go through the test, and you get 3 different people to do it with you, I can't imagine anyone wouldn't answer the questions the same way I do. And I'm severe, right? Psychiatrists care about these people. They don't care about normal, because that indicates there's no real relevance. But in the middle of that, you've got this thing called moderate dysfunction, which nobody has looked at until today. Yeah? And the truth is, whilst I might be ADHD here, I've got lots of other parts of me that are moderate in lots of other ways, because we're never one thing. But what's interesting is that other people who aren't ADHD but share moderate dysfunction with me make similar decisions in the same way as me. And so whilst a psychiatrist is looking for a 70% level of accuracy, in marketing, if we get like a 7% level, we're doing pretty well. And we're doing a bit better than that. So what you discover is, I like taking long journeys in cars, driving. And the reason I do is because it ties up a bit of my brain, so I can then concentrate on a book or do something else. Yeah? That's the reason why I like driving, because it in some ways ties up a part of my brain, so I'm a bit more calm and like something else. It's not because of me being private. It's a way for me to self-medicate my ADHD. And what you will discover is that lots of people who like taking car journeys may have a moderate dysfunction as well, and they're using the car not as a means to travel, but as a means of focus. Yeah? Which to someone who doesn't have ADHD makes no fucking sense. Right? inexplicable behaviour. Why would I choose to drive in horrible traffic? Because at least I can have a phone call and concentrate on it. So we are interested in making segmentations not based on who, where, what, but on the why. Yeah? Because if I know why you do something, I have a much greater chance of meeting your need. So we've developed a thing called MP with psychiatrists and psychologists, and we normally make really fab content for people, but that's much less interesting. But we made a cute video. Can I have permission to play my cute video?
Right, let's not ignore the elephant in the room, shall we?
I'm not an elephant, I'm a mammoth.
I'm talking about the danger of relying on demographics. That Elon Tusk, he's a bit touchy.
Oh yeah, alright. What's the problem with demographics then?
It's easy to put too much emphasis on things we find it convenient to measure, like where people live, their age, gender, or income. But does that help a brand like Jurassic Park here find out why they all share the same love for
3 grande orange mocha well milk frappuccinos, 1 to go.
to go? Well,
Truth be told, you're not the only brand hunting that elusive millennial penguin.
Oh my god, post it in mids.
Or, worse still, putting that millennial penguin on a pedestal. So empowered. Hashtag blessed. The problem with a penguin on a pedestal is you've missed what really makes them tick. Their unmet need, if you will.
fish.
But evidently, we're more interested in unmet needs than demographics, because we'd rather be revealing truths that actually make sense than talking bull.
Bull? The nerve of it. Can a bull do this? Or this? Impala. Impala.
That's why we've worked with clinical psychologists and psychiatrists to figure out proprietary tools what take a peek into the brains of consumers so we can see the world through their eyes. That way we can actually understand why they do the things they do. We've created Evidently's multi-phasic profile index.
Multi-phasic profile index.
Oh. We call it MP.
It's an ingenious yet simple insight tool that reveals what's really driving your consumers' behaviour.
Hello? Karen?
If you'd like to see the world the way your consumers do, get in touch. We'd love to help.
That's the glib way of describing it. But the one point which I like in it is putting consumers on pedestals. Has anyone ever got involved in writing pen portraits of consumers? She's brave but bold. She listens. And they're bullshit. Because, no, she's not. She's fucking overworked and miserable. And so whereas pen portraits on a love letter, we put a scalpel to consumers. And we don't do it because we wish to exploit them. We do it so we can see the world through their eyes and actually perhaps understand them better and solve their problems better. I could talk a lot about the stuff behind it. Essentially what we've done, we've repurposed a whole bunch of stuff which was never designed for this. It's designed to help sick people, but help us better understand what's really going on with consumers. So it cross-references a whole bunch of different sources, and then it gives us a very quick tool to both create hypotheses. In fact, what we do with MP is we don't start with the data, we start with a bunch of hypotheses, and then use the data then to validate or invalidate it, because it's actually much faster that way. They're based on pretty long research in terms of how many different types of people with ADHD, for example. I'll give you an example. We talked about multiple sclerosis. Right? It makes sense to us, correct? That there's a medication, it is free at the point of it is approved, right? And what do you want to do? We always talk about behavior change, because that's the only business that I'm in, which is getting people to do differently. To get them to do differently, they've got to believe differently. And actually, if you ask any neurologist, if they got MS, what would they do? They take the drug immediately. Yeah? And if you ask them what they're doing, they say, yeah, we're giving it to all our patients. They're not. So this is an inexplicable behavior, okay? And so we used MP to try to make sense of who a consultant neurologist is. Does anyone know any neurologists in the room? You do. This is what I get. Male or female? Male. Great. Is he high IQ?
Yes.
Good. Is he a little bit introvert? Good. Would he could you imagine being a sort of an analyst at sort of the NSA perhaps? Yeah, very good. Yeah, so we discovered, was that good? That was like Derren Brown, wasn't it? Doctors aren't doctors. And in fact, historically, we've treated doctors as if they're doctors. And of course, he didn't by accident become a neurologist. And one of the things we'll discover is 10 years ago with neurology, they just basically observed what happened to people. They didn't treat it. There have been radical changes in what's happened. And as a result now, there are very effective treatments, but they make no sense to neurologists. And in fact, neurologists have far more in common with airline pilots than they do with other doctors. An airline pilot has a rules of procedure. They go through checklists, which is why no matter what the evidence of them in front of them, they will fly directly into the aeroplane if that's what the book says. Yeah? Sully almost got in trouble because he didn't follow the rules when he did land the craft properly. Operating procedure. They worked operating procedure. And once you understand that, highly inflexible. And in fact, why is that? Well, there's an underlying psychology and psychiatry to these people. Be careful about what I'm describing. I'm not saying that all neurologists are a bit Asperger's. Okay? I'm not saying that. I'm saying that most neurologists are have something called social problematic communication disorder. Okay? And I can tell you, in my experience, about 70% of the male neurologists that I have now dealt with have a moderate dysfunction in this area. And if I were to ask anyone who doesn't have it a very, very simple question, you say, oh, that's a good way to ask me a question, I'll answer it. If you ask a simple question to someone with this disorder, you'll get a terrible answer. Ask them a question with 4 different clauses within the syntax, you'll get a fabulous answer and it'll influence them. It affects the way that we communicate with them because we understand how their brains process. Have I lost everyone yet? You'll see our work in the world. You'll see what we're doing. So we're trying to change it because, and who are the people who are most getting screwed over because of this? Most neurologists are men or women? Men. Okay? Women find out they've got MS around the same time mostly when they're also thinking about babies. The neurologist thinks, you know, I'll be helpful. Let's put this off until you've had the baby. It's a disaster. Yeah? Women are being terribly deserved as part of this. And not because the doctors are bad. It's because they're risk averse. If overnight all the neurologists did oncology and vice versa, everybody would receive this drug. That's our challenge. Millennial yogurt. We were asked by Friesland Campina to create a brand new yogurt targeting millennials. Okay? That was awkward because I don't think millennials exist, right? Yeah? Do we agree that millennials probably doesn't exist as a helpful group? Anyone here think it is helpful? Okay, I'm happy to be wrong. So what do they want? It didn't exist, this brand, and they wanted people to purchase, trial, and post it to social media. This is the only thing I'm ever going to eat for the rest of my life, probably. And what was this? It was a thick Greek yogurt, sauces, and it was under €1. So we're talking about a very basic product, yeah, which is a Greek yogurt. And this target obviously was a disaster for us. So what we do is use MP, and we use a bunch of tools to try and identify what we find as sort of inexplicable behaviours. And the behaviour that we identified was this notion of taking pictures of food. Okay? Some people do it, and it's important to them, some people don't. It's a very interesting behaviour. Why do you think people take pictures of their food and post it on Instagram? Anyone got any ideas? Why?
To brag.
Huh?
To brag.
Okay. Huh?
Food envy.
Food envy? You're quite good, you guys. You could do this for a living. Anyone else?
There's nothing else to take a picture of.
Yeah. If it was at an extreme level, the underlying behaviour that underpins posting pictures to Instagram for your followers is to make other people feel worse. Okay? I can do it as a matter of fact. And one of my best friends does this. So this isn't a judgment, yeah, but that is the underlying behaviour, and I can explain to you exactly what, and it is not a conscious part of the effort, but it is absolutely the case. The same, by the way, a lot of gift giving has a very similar quality. Out of this behaviour, we created a subset questionnaire. So if you're seeing a psychiatrist, they will often, for serious disorders, they'll give you maybe 700 questionnaires, which all cross-referenced, and they'll take them out into the wider world and ask 17 different people. That's not practical. We've managed to take subsets from our database of around 6 questions to get a very inaccurate read, and it comes back with a very accurate answer to our level. We're marketeers, we're not in the medical profession. 7% is fine by me. And based on these answers, we were able to really identify this audience, and you can think about where you would fit on the spectrum. We don't change the questions. The questions are not created by us. These are the exact questions hidden within lots of other questionnaires which are used by psychiatrists to diagnose whether or not you, sir, are a psychopath. Have you ever fantasized about becoming a librarian? No? Just as well. What's interesting about some of these questions, by the way, is that they haven't been created by psychiatrists. There are thousands and thousands of long interviews with people they know to be properly nuts, like me, and based on those answers, they've discovered patterns which sometimes don't make sense today. You know, so there are these weird trends amongst people wanting to be librarians, but not, which indicates something else. So that's what we're tapping into. So we created we call it a profile called social narcissists, okay? And the social narcissist is the person who takes pictures and posts them, okay? They're often confused with millennials, because most people who are social narcissists are millennials. Do you know the reason for that is? Because it's recent mobile phone technology, and it's a time thing. But I assure you, within a couple of years, 5 minutes. I'm only halfway through. I'll zip through. When we describe our profiles, we don't use pen portraits because I think they're very misleading. We create archetypal quotes, very carefully constructed quotes which get to the heart of who they are. It's a much more succinct way of trying to understand how this person responds and behaves than these reams and reams of paragraphs. We believe that the work that we do has to be understood by the most junior person at the very end of the line who has to implement it. And if it doesn't make perfect sense to them, we've failed. So I'll talk you basically. So at the end, you create a framework. So what do we want to do? What we want to do is get people to trial post to their social feed. That's a behaviour change that'd be really good for us. And we created a belief, and we created a brand built around that called Oops, which is deliciously shareable. We talked about shared pictures on social media. Their unmet need is peer admiration, recognition, and fame. Yeah, very simple things. That make sense. They share experience to make others feel worse. It's a form of sadism. Don't feel too bad, Camilla. And we call them social narcissist. We want people to become an oops advocate. Can we give them something in return? And we're going to give them confidence through validation. So we created a brand where the truth is sharing food on Instagram makes it taste better. And we've created this brand called Oops, which is serendipity in a pot. And it's the first brand, to my knowledge, which is entirely based around a behaviour on Instagram. Ground up. Launched this year in Holland. Yep. All of the images that we did in terms of testing were based on Instagram images to see whether or not I could actually see it well on Instagram. Because the first rule of any new brand is, does it exist? Can I see it? So I'll show you the launch. This is like a positioning film which might summarise. The internal piece.
Dessert. It's soft focus escape fantasies. It's low fat or low fun, naughty or wholesome. But what if we took all that and... oops! Because we're the dessert for flavour geeks, taste activists. And when it comes to indulgence, we don't compromise. We think if someone says you've got permission to indulge, you've got permission to tell them where to go. That's why we made something that's perfect, because it's not. It's broken chunks and big flavours. It's half stirred, half swirled. It's chock full of moments you want to devour, pour over, feast on. Taste that comes at you from all angles. Mouthfuls you have to capture, savour and share with everyone. You don't just need a spoon, you need a filter. So dive in, get involved, mix it up. Welcome, flavour seekers. Thanks for the follow.
Does that sort of make sense? And so millennials don't exist, but I do know people who do post stuff to Instagram. That is a real consumer. So we've launched this thing, it's all gone rather well, we're rather excited. We're focusing on things like the Netflix and chill moment, doing lots of stuff on trying to understand their real lives. And we're trying to understand consumers in terms of what really goes on in their head. Is the social narcissist a man or a woman? It might be both. It tends to be more women, but it isn't just women. Yeah? And increasingly older. It's that whole, Facebook for years was all about young people. Then people were surprised when it turned out that my mum was permanently on it. It's the same point, right? My mother's, it is, don't confuse the signal with the noise. Anyway, So in summary, because I've run out of time, look at the data, but then try to understand the inexplicable behavior that might be being indicated, because it's probably revealing an unmet need. And if you can craft an authentic brand story to meet that need, then you've probably got a better chance of actually speaking to people authentically and effectively, rather than deluding yourself into thinking that people care about what you're doing. And you might even have an opportunity to actually mean something more to people than just the next brand along. So that's sort of my general take. I hope that wasn't too dull. I do like the sound of my own voice. Have I got time for questions or not? Not really. I do. I'm single, by the way, so. But I make a terrible, terrible partner. I'm awful. Yeah. Any questions? Oh, come on. Others feel inadequate. Yes. Well, I feel inadequate anyway.
So you talked a lot about getting into the mindset of people. How do you approach what people need versus what they think they need?
That's a very easy question to answer. The first thing is don't ask them. Okay? So we have a very good tool which is based on something called Johari's window, which we use with a combination of some quite clever data to analyze and look at. I'll give you an example. Does anyone know here, I'm going to be careful because I might offend people, know people who send out letters every year about their family and about all that they achieved that year? Yeah? Are they good? Hands up all those people who think they're good parents. Hands up all those people who think they're probably not very good parents. That's good. So, as a general rule, that behavior, if you ask them you're good parents, we're the best parents of all, we're so good we send a letter every year, it's a strong indicator they're actually probably not that great. Yeah? Very strong indicator. In general, really good parents spend their time with their children, not writing a long letter to everyone else. Why do people write letters about their children every year? To make other people feel worse. Yeah, it's a form of sadism. It's just like the narcissist, right? So that's what we look to their behaviors. The worst thing we can ever do is ask consumers what they think, because they may not know or they may be hiding. So we group them into 4 different categories of the stuff that we all know and they agree with, the stuff that they're keeping from us, okay, the stuff that they're blind to that we can see, and the stuff that no one's even considered but actually turns out might be true. Because no one's ever really considered the possibility that actually the reason people post pictures of food is because they have a degree of sadism in them. That is true. So the trick is not to talk to consumers, but to observe and listen to what they're doing and actually try and decode their behavior. And you see it all around you. And when you're landing on whoever's traveled on a plane landing with their partner, and you actually, you basically go to the bathroom, but you make the point of going to the bathroom, as soon as possible, whereas your partner runs as fast as they can through security, gets back in the car and drives desperate to the toilet, miserable, but they want to get out quickly, right? Does that sound familiar? Yeah, more men do the latter than women, right? That's a very interesting insight, right? That's an underlying behavior. They're not aware of that. Okay? That's what we look for. If you ask consumers will only tell you what they know about themselves, and very few of us have very good self-knowledge. Look at me. Anyone else?
Yeah.
I think.
Isn't it a lot about people seeking significance for themselves as well?
No.
Just making other people feel bad.
No. No. We'd like to think that was the case. Listen, I'm not someone who goes on the side of genetics or developmental things. I think that the jury's still out, and I have my own opinions, but for example, in my case, let's say with ADHD, it's 70% heritable. It's as heritable as height. Yeah? So the underlying motivator is irrelevant. The way my brain is wired is what's driving it. Okay? I'm wired that way, the same as I'm wired to perhaps be a little bit chubby sometimes. Okay? Now, I might rationalize later that I'm just trying to have an interesting time, but actually the truth is, the defining feature of it is the way that I have been set up to see the world. There are many, many, many parts of our brains and our psychiatry which are kind of there as a fixed point, but which manifest themselves later on in life in lots of different ways. Like clinical depression is one of those things as well. Your brain functions differently. And actually, clinical depressives and that's why there's this frustration. Because why are you so miserable? It doesn't make sense. Everything's so great. It's impossible for someone who isn't a clinical depressive to understand how they feel, because they don't see the world that way. So no, I don't think it is about unmet need. I think, like Myers-Briggs talks about self-actualization, all this other nonsense. Yeah, for everyone. For some people, self-actualizations is all that matters. And for other people, having a roof over my head is all that matters. And that's mostly defined by your underlying psychology, not by anything else. So I don't think it's about people. I think it's, and we sometimes say things which aren't very polite or convenient, but are nonetheless true. Yeah? It is true to say that very few women have psychopathic tendencies. Very, very few, which is why you don't have that many female serial killers. Yeah? It is a truth. We know that from lots of data research. So, and again, there's no absolutes. I don't believe that we have anything other than a tiny minority of understanding in this. All we can do is add maybe a little bit extra. Yeah, because all of us are getting it wrong most of the time anyway, so if we can try and get a little bit of an edge, maybe that's better. So sorry to be so harsh, but yeah, and of course I could be completely wrong. Anyway,
Hi. The condition that you've highlighted.
With whom? With me?
Your condition.
ADHD.
Is this an example of like wanting to understand the way the brain works? So could you explore other conditions?
Yes, that's exactly what we're doing. Okay. So we actually start with the conditions and work out. We don't start with consumers and work backwards. We know that ADHD is a constant within groups. Okay, both at a severe and at a moderate level, and it's much more it's a much greater driver to why people make decisions than where they're based or how much money they earn. Yeah, which is why chefs and entrepreneurs also both quite like to take long car journeys. Anyone? No, I'm on Tinder. Yeah.
I think that's very good insight that we need to look at the needs, not the demographics. The only reason why we look at demographics in order to target people, because you provided us with a very good example of how you kind of come up with an insight, but looking at your ad, you're still targeting millennial women. How will you find this people?
That's something else. So I haven't shared everything, obviously, because it's confidential. It's not an ad, actually. It's one of our positioning films. So that's not consumer-facing. So in fact, what we do is, once we understand the social narcissist, then we look at what their media behaviors are and how they consume that media. And so for...
In scale.
So in scale, it's actually very interesting, because people always ask, well, how big is millennials? So one of the reasons why people revert to millennials, it's lots of people. But it's not very useful if it doesn't describe anything about them. You know, women's lots of people. Does that help me? Doesn't help me at all. We can make reasonably accurate extrapolations based upon severe dysfunction on the populations, but there is no long-term data from us at all that's so new to know for a fact. However, but media behaviors do indicate a lot of this. So, for example, someone who gives lots of advice on social media is a strong indicator. Yeah?
Sorry, can I just ask, if anyone's got a meeting next door, can you please all follow on through to the meetings next door? That'd be great, and then we'll all get off to lunch.
All right,
Thank you.
I'll leave. Sorry, I've got to get in trouble. Thank you so much for your time.